Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. The great Jewish revolt against the mighty Roman Empire began in 66 of the Common Era, and it culminated with the destruction of the Second Temple at the hand of the Roman general Titus 4 years later on the 9th of Av, 70 of the Common Era. The temple, of course, was destroyed by fire. But rather than describing it as having been reduced to ashes, the sages of the Talmud chose to depict Titus's actions with a metaphor. They said, he ground already milled flour into smaller, even finer, tinier pieces. What did they mean? Well, when you ground grain, it loses nothing of its substance. For every pound of grain one has at the outset, there remains 1 pound of grain in the form of flour. The only difference is that the original cohesion of the particles has been lost. There are 2 basic ways to destroy a structure. The first is to blast the building into nothingness, to atomize it, leaving no trace of the original materials that went into its construction. And in our lives, we have seen this form of destruction in the destruction of the Twin Towers. But the other method is to dismember the building, to take it apart stone by stone. And in this approach, the structure is effectively destroyed because it's reduced to a collection of stones, but the individual pieces still exist. They are changed only in that they are missing the adhesion that had made them into a single unified entity. And by the way, last year when we went on that virtual tour of the Temple Mount on Tisha B'Av with Tzvi Sperber in Jerusalem, he showed us some of the huge fallen stones, disconnected fallen stones on the Temple Mount in those wonderful archaeological excavations. The nature of the physical destruction mirrored the effect of the spiritual destruction. As Rabbi Aaron Lopiansky points out in his book, Timepieces, the Hebrew word for destruction, churban, contains the same letters as the Hebrew word for connected, chibur. Churban means destroyed, chibur means connected. So the physical churban, the physical destruction, led to a loss of chibur, of connectedness, of the stones from which it was built. And in spiritual terms, it led to the loss of connectedness amongst the Jewish people when we were sent into exile and scattered eventually to all corners of the earth. But in their comment about grinding already milled flour into finer pieces, the sages of the Talmud meant more than just to describe the form of the temple's physical destruction. They were very clear that the primary cause of the destruction of the Second Temple was sinat chinam, baseless hatred and division. And Josephus, who was an eyewitness to these events, graphically describes the deep divisions that were present amongst the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the inability of the leadership to forge a unity of purpose and to agree a strategy was without any doubt a contribution to the fall of the city. And so the sages captured this state of social disintegration in one single pithy statement. Titus ground already milled flour into smaller, even finer, tinier pieces. In other words, our chibur, our connectedness to each other, was already falling apart. We were in the process of self-destructing. And all that Titus did was to grind us into even smaller, disconnected pieces. But he didn't, and he couldn't destroy us. Post-destruction, in the absence of a unifying temple, we had to find a way to reestablish chibur, the glue that would connect us together again. And we came up with a magnificent concept called Kehillah. It was created by the sages post-temple. Kehillah means community, places where Jews, wherever they were in the world, would be able to come together to share values, social interactions, to pray and study together, to create an environment for their children to grow up in with strong Jewish identities. And it worked. And although the nature of Kehillah over the centuries has morphed and changed, Kehillah still continues to be the glue that holds us together. So 2 centuries after the destruction of the temple, COVID has threatened Jewish life in another way. It's tested the functioning of Kehillah to its limits because it attacked chibur, the connectedness between members of a community that lies at the very core of Kehillah and that makes it work. And miraculously, with the help of technology, we've been able to hold together despite the almost complete absence of physical interaction. But the greater challenge actually lies ahead as we now seek to rebuild our communities and to strengthen the chibur. 70 years ago, the Holocaust destroyed the communities of Eastern Europe by literally turning them into ashes. It was a Churban of the first kind, total destruction, reducing Jews and their communities to ash. Despite his efforts, Hitler, like Titus, failed to destroy either the Jewish people or our instinct to build communities. Kehillot now flourish even in those places where Hitler sought to stamp them out, including Berlin. So if we could rebuild Kehillot after the catastrophic Churban, we can certainly achieve the same after an assault on Chibur. But make no mistake, it will depend upon the efforts of each one of us to be physically present again in our synagogues within the limits of personal safety and the safety of others, of course, and to make our buildings hum with vibrant, connected life again. Shabbat Shalom.